So a couple of days ago, I created a video outlining my experience having been sat in court during the trial of the nurse Lucy Letby and witnessing firsthand Lucy Letby take the stand and give evidence. In this video, I'm going to expand on what I saw and what I heard in court and some of my own opinions on Lucy Letby, the individual. But before we start today's video, I just again want to make it clear that these were simply my own interpretations in terms of how I felt during that time period and my own personal opinion of Lucy Letby at that point. This video is in no way, shape or form supposed to add or subtract anything from the evidence that we have heard in this case thus far. Now, in the previous video that I made regarding my own experience and what I saw in court having seen Lucy Letby take the stand and give evidence firsthand, I was trying to draw some comparisons and trying to explain to the viewers at home how exactly she came across. And the closest example that I could come up with was Lucy Letby's police interview. And that's not just to say, well, of course that would be the closest example, it's Lucy Letby, but no, that's not what I was getting at. It's the way in which she answers the questions, the way in which she speaks, the words that she chooses to use when she answers. All of that was very, very similar as to what I witnessed in court when she was answering the questions posed to her by the prosecution barrister Nicholas Johnson. And interestingly, I came across a newspaper article here which states the following. Detective Sergeant Daniel Stonier echoed these observations of her colleague and claimed the twisted health worker was unusually calm and devoid of emotion when being quizzed. She told the newspaper, quote, "The Lucy Letby you saw in court was the Lucy Letby I interviewed. Her tone, her approach to answering questions, even the pauses were very much the same. Lucy Letby was calm, she was quite cool, she answered the questions, she was confident with the answers. She talked, but there was no emotion." When I look back now, and I put all of this into some kind of context, I think that's probably why I struggled so much after the first day. Because I'm just, as I said in that first episode, I remember driving home thinking, okay, I've gone there absolutely convinced of this person's guilt. And now I'm coming away thinking to myself, I was not expecting that. I was not expecting to see someone giving answers in a calm manner, in a matter-of-fact way, quite confident, quietly confident, I would say. And it really concerned me because I just came home and I thought, I don't know what to believe. Because everything that I saw in herself appeared, and I'm going to say that again, appeared like I was being told the truth or I was listening to someone who was telling a truthful version of events. And it does concern me how someone can act that way. Now, some people are going to say, well, it's because of how she looks or how she speaks. And that's not what I'm getting at. When you speak to people in real life, everyday life, you just get a general vibe, don't you? You get a general vibe of that personality, that person's personality, whether what they're speaking about is truthful or whether they're sort of embellishing certain things that they say. You just get a general feel. And that was really what I was focused on, just getting a general feel of who this person was. But she gave away nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now, I don't know what I expected to find or expected to see when I saw Lucy Letby. Did I expect to see someone who was overly anxious, overly nervous, someone who was trying to plead their innocence, someone who was overly emotional? I don't know, because that is what I didn't find. I found exactly what is stated there by the Detective Sergeant Daniel Stonier. Her tone, her approach to answering questions, even the pauses were very much the same. Letby was cool, calm, and she answered the questions. She was confident with the answers. She talked, but there was no emotion. And I think that's the key there. There was no emotion. So you couldn't get a read on her. You couldn't get a read on her at all. There was no emotion there. It was all very much matter of fact. What is also worth pointing out, however, is that when I say void of emotion or she didn't have emotion, it wasn't like you were watching or listening to a drone. Like someone being like, no, no, or yes. Yeah, it wasn't like that either. And that's why it's so difficult to try and really explain the person that I saw, the person that I witnessed. And again, all I can say is take a listen to this very short clip And the only difference I would say between what you see in front of you in this police interview, this very short clip, the only difference is that she was speaking clearer in court, a little bit louder, and a bit more concise. In the police interview, she seems quite sad or feeling sorry for herself in a lot of ways. That's how it's coming across in her tonality, to me personally. But in court, as I say, a little bit higher volume, more clear, a little bit more concise. But the way in which she answers the questions and, as I say, the words that she chooses to use were very much similar.
I mean, there have been a lot more deaths, and that I've been linked to somebody that was there for a lot of them.
Did you have any concerns that there was a rise in the mortality rate?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about that. What concerns did you have?
I think we'd all just noticed as a team in general, the nursing staff, that this was a rise compared to previous years.
So another instance in which I was in court for was when Lucy Letby said the words, "I knew what I was looking for," and then corrected herself and said, "I knew what I was looking at." Now this was a massive talking point online. I remember driving home and thinking, Christ, is this the first time that Lucy Letby has actually slipped up? So let me just give you a bit of background concerning what this actually means. So they're talking about one of the cases, and it revolves around Lucy Letby and one of her colleagues. And Lucy Letby goes to the doorway of one of the nursery rooms, and she looks in and says to her colleague, "Oh, the child looks pale." And her colleague comes in and, you know, has a look from the doorway, and the room is very dark. It's quite dark, and the lights get turned up. I think it's the colleague from memory that goes over to the cot, and the baby is like literally on the verge of death. And Nicholas Johnson Casey, the prosecuting barrister, said to Lucy Letby, "So how could you see something that your colleague couldn't?" And she said, "Well, I don't know. You know, that's just what I saw." And he said, "I mean, do you have better eyesight than your colleague?" And she said, "No." And he said, "So then how could you have possibly seen what you claim to have seen when your colleague, you know, didn't report that?" And she said, "Well, I knew what I was looking for. I knew what I was looking at." And it's really interesting when I look back at this, because I don't think Nicholas Johnson, the barrister, actually picked up on this until Lucy Letby decided to change what she had said. It wasn't as if she said, "I knew what I was looking for," and then he said, "What do you mean? What do you mean by that?" It wasn't like that at all. It was because Lucy Letby decided to change what she had said that then there was a little bit of a pause, probably like 3 or 4 seconds of literal nothing. And then Nicholas Johnson says, he sort of picked up on it at that point and said, "What do you mean you knew what you were looking for?" And then she just sat there staring straight forward, and it was just so awkward. Like there was no sound at all. And then she sort of started, I think from memory, she started fiddling about with something and said, "Oh, I'm feeling quite confused. I'm getting mixed up with all the dates. I need to have a break." And then the judge literally just said, "I think everyone's had enough for today." And he basically sent everyone off for the day. And that was the end of the testimony. But yeah, the one thing that stands out to me is why Lucy Letby felt the need to change what she said. Because, I mean, anyone can make a slip-up. Anyone could say, "I knew what I was looking for." But would you really feel a need to correct yourself? And I think that's quite an interesting point to make. Now, the reason why that phrase was so important is that it's alluding to the fact that Lucy Letby already had prior knowledge of the baby's condition. So by her saying, "I knew what I was looking for," is giving the impression I've already done something and now I'm alerting to my colleague to what I've done because I know what I'm looking for when I'm sticking my head in the room. I'm looking for her being pale and I'm going to alert my colleague. Rather than, I knew what I was looking at in terms of I could see she was pale and that means X, Y, and Z. So that's why it was so important at the time and why it was potentially so important for Lucy Letby to change what she said. And I mean, she changed it by her own choice. It wasn't as if Nicholas Johnson said, "What do you mean you knew what you were looking for?" She said, this is exactly how it went. She said, "Oh, well, I knew what I was looking for. I knew what I was looking at." It was literally like that. "I knew what I was looking for." And then slightly, a little bit quieter. "I knew what I was looking for. I knew what I was looking at." It's like trying to sort of cover it a little bit. And that was when Nicholas Johnson picked up on exactly what had been said. So the next instance that I remember, or that I recall, is Lucy Letby being asked to read out a text message between herself and Dr. A. Now, Dr. A was this married man, this guy who she may or may not have had some kind of romantic relationship with, possibly. It's all unproven, but whatever. And it's quite interesting because when these text messages, when these medical documents, anything to do with what's being looked at in terms of a document, it's all being shown. It's all enlarged on this big screen. So you're there literally watching or looking at this text message. And the text message said, "Okay, will do, see you soon." And it had a heart emoji. And I can't remember if this was from Letby or the doctor, but it's between the two of them. And Nicholas Johnson says, "Okay, I want you to read out that text message, please." And there's like a little silence. And then Lucy Letby says, "Okay, will do, see you soon." And then Nicholas Johnson said, "You missed a bit?" And then this bit sort of awkward silence again. And Lucy Letby says, okay, will do, see you soon." "You missed a bit?" And then she said, "What, the emoji?" And he said, "Yeah, what is it?" She said, "It's a heart emoji." And he said, "Oh, still not your boyfriend?" And she said, "No." And this was like a common theme, you know, and I don't think that was the only text message, but this was one of the occasions, or one of many occasions, where things started to unravel. And this was really quite interesting because this was the last day of the cross-examination. And as soon as we got in there, as soon as everyone was in there, there was just the prosecution barrister and the defence barrister along with the judge. And I don't know if this is common practice in court or cases or whatever, but the prosecution were bringing to the table some evidence or documentation on the very last day. It was like very last minute. It was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're going to include these 27, I think it's 27 pages, 27 pages of Lucy Letby's social life. And do you have any, you know, any sort of issue with me bringing this to the table?" And this, that and the other. And there was a little bit of discussion, and it all seemed, "Oh no, you can actually do this. You can bring this evidence right at the last minute. And what we're going to do is we're going to give Lucy Letby 30 minutes to read through these files, have an idea of what they're about, and then you're going to be questioned on them." Now, the reason that I use the terminology or the phrase "things started to unravel" is that this is when little cracks in Lucy Letby's testimony, and particularly regarding her arrest and her social life, and what she had told, most importantly, the jury, these little details started to be proven to be false. So just to give you an idea as to what happened, I think we were let in about 10 o'clock that morning. And as I say, this 27-page document was put in front of Letby, and they basically said, "Okay, go and sit somewhere and read it, and then we're going to question you on it." And this 27-page document was all about Lucy Letby's social life. And then on the screen, a little bit later on, as they get into the questioning, you know, what does this mean? Where did you go here? What were you doing on this day? They bring up this sort of, it looked a little bit like an Excel sort of graph or an Excel spreadsheet. And he said, "Here we can see on the 27th you did this, on the 13th you messaged this, on the 14th you spoke to this person." And then it had a couple of thumbnails of like pictures of Lucy Letby on nights out. And bearing in mind, Lucy Letby at this point in time had told the jury that she was isolated from her friends and her family, as she called them, on the unit, and, you know, her life was crumbling. Yet here we were looking at these little thumbnails, and it's a shame they didn't enlarge these photos, to be honest, but they were like little thumbnails of pictures of cocktails and a guy with a funny hat on, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And it just, yeah, it was just all laid out in front of you. And I could see what Lucy Letby was saying. Lucy Letby was saying, "Initially I was told by my union rep that I wasn't to speak to anybody on the unit, and I was allowed to speak to 3 individuals. One was Dr. A, and then 2 of her colleagues. Other than that, I was told I can't speak to anybody, particularly about the investigation." And she then said, but that did change. She said, at some point in time, those rules or regulations were relaxed and I was allowed to speak to other people. But she didn't say that or didn't tell that to the jury. So when she did some, I don't know if it's like a defence, some sort of document from the defence to outline her case or whatever, she didn't make it clear. She didn't even mention it, to be honest. The fact that she was allowed to speak to other members of staff after a certain point, and had indeed been out on these nights out getting drunk and this, that and the other, days out to the races, and all of this stuff was kept away from the jury until, as I say, the final day of Lucy Letby's cross-examination. And then Nicholas Johnson brings up Lucy Letby's arrest, and he said, "What were you wearing? Tell us about your arrest." And then there's this sort of silence again as Lucy Letby's thinking, and she says, "Well, I've already told you once, so I don't want to go over it again." He said, "Well, that was a long time ago. I want you to remind us, please." And she said, "The police knocked at my door at 6 a.m. and I was arrested." And this is obviously the video that we've seen recently. And he said, "And what were you wearing?" And she said, "Well, I was wearing my pyjamas and I had a Lee Cooper top over the top of that." And then he said, "That's not what you've told the jury. You told the jury," and he's looking at this paper, and that you were arrested in your nightwear, in your pyjamas, as you called it." And then she was just sort of quiet. And then she said, "Well, no." And then he said, "Do you want to see the video of your arrest?" And I thought, Christ, we're going to see, the arrest video. And then immediately she said, "No." Like, really, just like, "No, I don't want to see that at all." And then he said, "You will," and I still remember how he said this. It's weird, the things that you remember. But it's the way that he spoke. He said, "You were wearing your blue Lee Cooper leisure suit, weren't you?" Like, and that's literally how he said it. Because, I've done quite a few videos of like the cross-examination, and I've probably put it across in quite an assertive way. He's very assertive, but quite subtle at the same time. And that's literally how he phrased it. He said, "You were taken away in your blue Lee Cooper leisure suit, weren't you?" And then she said, "Yes." And she even tried to deny this as we went through the further arrest number 2. "What were you wearing then?" And "I was wearing a nightie." "No, you said this." And it was this sort of back and forth. And then we got to the third arrest, and then she said, "Well, yeah, I was wearing my pyjamas in the first arrest." He said, "Do you want to," and this is like the third occasion now, he said, "Do you want to watch the video?" And then she just didn't reply. And then he said something along the lines of, "What advantage were you trying to gain by telling this jury that you were arrested in your pyjamas when you were actually arrested in your blue Lee Cooper leisure suit," as he put it? What advantage were you looking to gain? Were you looking for sympathy? And you just thought, Christ, she's really been caught out here. And I think this goes back to, the first part of this video of just how convincing and how unshakable, even when she's caught out in a clear lie, she's still completely unflappable. "Oh, okay. There's no sort of nervousness, no sort of over-explaining. Her tone doesn't change at all. It's all just very monotone and just, okay. It's almost like when she speaks, she's speaking the truth. Maybe it's her truth, and that's why it appears so compelling and so believable. But even when, as I say, she's been caught out in a complete barefaced lie, it didn't seem to shake her at all. So really, after attending on a number of days and watching Lucy Letby give evidence, it wasn't until I was able to really strip back everything that was being said, and towards the end, most likely, I guess, of her cross-examination, when real glaring inconsistencies and lies were proven by the prosecution, that I started to think to myself, I am witnessing here a very, very skilled liar, a manipulator, someone who is deceiving people like it's absolutely nothing, like it's second nature. And I wouldn't say that makes you fearful, but you're struggling to really, and even now I still struggle to comprehend what I actually witnessed. Because I believe that this case actually goes quite a lot deeper, and I'll probably get into that in some future videos, but as I made mention to in a previous video that I made, I certainly don't believe that these are only victims of Lucy Letby. And I think she did genuinely fool a lot of people. A lot of people. And as I say, towards the end of the trial, the last few days, particularly the last day of her cross-examination, when lies were proven by the prosecution, lies in terms of her arrest, lies in terms of her social life, she was trying to explain the port missing, the datix form that she filled in. She tried to give it reasons for why it was filled in at a certain time. I can't remember the exact details of this, but Mr. Johnson, Nicholas Johnson, I have to give 100% credit to this individual, because he was ready for absolutely everything that Lucy Letby threw at him. Absolutely everything. I remember sitting there thinking to myself, you wouldn't want to be in an argument with Nicholas Johnson because he's got an answer for absolutely everything. And this is as clear as day in my mind what happened next. Because he's talking about this datix form. He's gone through the text messages of Lucy Letby being in a meltdown, a panic. She's concerned that finally the net is closing in on her, so to speak. And he's going through the text messages, and then it turns out that a few days later, Lucy Letby then fills out this datix form about a bung that's missing on one of the lines, one of the pieces of medical equipment, that could cause, as she put it, as Lucy Letby put it, an accidental air embolus. And Nicholas Johnson says, and I'm not going to get the timings exactly right here, but just the basis of what he said. He said to Lucy Letby, so you filled out this datix form, but you've been in work for 7 hours at this point? And then she said, well, looking at this form here, that's the first time that I've needed to access this port for medication. And then so immediately she's come back with quite a fair response, you would say. But then straight away, without even a second, without even a gap, Nicholas Johnson said, so do you check the medical equipment of the babies that you are looking for? As a fully trained Band 5 nurse, do you look at the children that you are treating? And Lucy Letby said, yes. Do you check the bungs are on the port of the line? Yes, I should have. Yes, he said. So straight away, even when she had a fairly decent response to one of his questions, he was already ready with the next one. Literally straight away without a second's thought. And you just looked at her and you realised in those moments, I am looking at someone who is able to lie, who is able to carry out a lie and not change in any way, shape or form. She can lie about the arrest. She can lie about being isolated from her friends and this, that and the other. But her demeanour in those moments did not change. It's the same answers that she gave when she was accused of murdering one of the children. The same body language, the same speech, the same answer, the same everything. And I thought to myself in that moment, if you are able to lie about these lesser details, shall we say, and you're able to keep your composure, then you can be lying about the entirety of this case. And that's what I thought to myself. I was just witnessing someone who is a very skilled liar. That is as simple as I can put it. She was very convincing. Very, very, very convincing. And I'm convinced that this is going to go further. This is going to be a very, very deep case that is going to uncover a lot more in the coming months and years. I really genuinely do feel that. And how can I summarise it? Pretty much as that investigator, that detective said there, void of emotion. Just void of emotion. I remember Nicholas Johnson saying, even these words, they're just hard to say. So he said, you are a murderer. You have murdered many children. I remember the exact words that he said. And she said, no, I didn't. I didn't harm. I haven't killed any children or harmed them. That's what she said. Yeah, it's an experience that I'll never forget. I'll never ever forget that I was in that situation witnessing someone who has now been found guilty of such horrendous crimes.